to Behaviorally Speaking, Leadership for Changemakers. I'm your host, Dr. Esther Bubb, and this episode is brought to you by Esther C. Bubb ABA Services. Today, I'm joined by Kathleen Mignone, an early intervention local education agency representative. Kathy brings more than 2 decades of experience in early childhood special education, beginning as an autistic support teacher and growing into a systems-level leader who supports families, educators, and interdisciplinary teams with clarity, compassion, and intention. Her journey from her early days shaping language and learning in preschool autistic support classrooms to guiding families and staff across early intervention systems to becoming a certified safety care trainer offers powerful lessons about purposeful leadership and human behavior. So let's dive in. So hi, Kathy. Thank you so much for joining the show. I am so happy to have you here with me. How are you feeling, Kathy, coming into today's conversation?
Well, I'm excited because I get to see and talk with you. That's the first feeling I have. And then just like a little bit of nervousness because I feel this is an important conversation and I want to represent myself and my experience in a way that hopefully people get value from, I think.
Yeah, I love that. I love that value. And you're excited and you're nervous, so maybe we can say you're ex-nervous.
That would be a good one. I might try that
one. But no, I'm very happy to have you here with me just to chat. You know, doing these shows and doing these conversations, it's also helpful to me. Like, it's just good to chat, like just have a conversation, and I'm able to learn from everyone I've had conversations with. So I'm really excited about what I'm going to learn from you tonight.
And I'm curious about the way the conversation will go, because I think anytime we've ever gotten into conversation together about whatever the topic is, I walk away feeling rejuvenated and like I learned something. So yeah. Ditto. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. So Kathy, we were talking about leadership, right? Can you share, and the thing, the premise that I'm really promoting is that leadership is not based on a title or a position. Everyone can be a leader in whatever they do, right? So can you talk to us a little bit about your unique leadership journey, Kathy? Your journey also resonates with me because, as you know, you were a teacher in a classroom when I was in the classroom as an ABA therapist. Fast forward years later, right? And we're back working together. Different contexts, because then we were both employees. At that point, you were an employee. I was a contractor in a different organization. So learning that, and then seeing photos of the student that I worked with, that we shared. So there's just that connection there. But can you talk to our listeners about your leadership journey from being an autistic support teacher, right, to people like me in your classroom as an ABA therapist, right, to then transitioning from that to your current role as a local education agency representative and or service coordinator?
Absolutely. So I think it just really amazes me to think about having a 20+ year career in early childhood special education. And so as a teacher, you think all about the dynamics of a classroom and the child themselves and the group together. And then you are a leader in that capacity. It doesn't feel like it at the time, especially as you're new. But then as you get the skill sets, you start really shaping how the children learn in a group with such significant boundaries or barriers when they're developing language, right? So that's a leadership role in itself. And I don't think teachers give themselves enough credit in these preschool programs, because if you really understood the impact you have by leading in those contexts, you would know the impact for that family and that child in a much greater way, right? And so
Yeah.
even those small steps you take in that role build that leadership bone or muscle, right?
Yeah.
And then as I grew in my leadership role of teaching and training other adults in the capacity of best practice, rooted in, compassion for the children, and then trying to take what was happening in that environment and stretch it out into the family life, or stretch it out into, if a child was transitioning into a different type of program because of what they learned with me, they could then learn it in a new setting, and including those general education peers. That was a new leadership role. So as I started to realize my impact and the kind of like the bug caught to everybody else around me. It was like contagious, right? So people were willing to work alongside me to improve the quality of education for these children. And then I started to realize, wait, like this could happen so many other ways in so many other places. And so service coordination had been a part of my life. I had a service coordinator as a teacher. So I started realizing, wait, maybe I can help other people because I have some good ideas, right? And I'm concerned. There's some concerns popping up because of, changes that were being made. So that's really what I think, starting at the base, you think you're just helping a child or then a group of children, to then the blossoming effect of, oh, wow, this is really working. And how can I help that in other way, help other people in other ways?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Kathy. I like a lot of what you said. I heard blossoming. I heard compassion, right? So it's also thinking about the person, the child as a person, but then the adult in your role now, you're supporting adults, students indirectly, but most directly adults. So would you say some of the reasons you've already mentioned, such as shaping, such as seeing students blossom, and you wanted to be able to expand your capacity to help others, right? From just the children to then the adults. Would you say any of that would be the core reasons that inspired you, or the cofactors that inspired you to transition from teaching, right, into service coordination, which requires a different level of responsibility, and then system levels responsibilities, right? Because now you're supporting, yes, as the child with the children, you're supporting across different systems, but with service coordination, you're supporting across, to me, a wider array of systems. Would you say was sort of being able to expand your impact from just, one group to like a larger group is what really inspired you? Or was it something else? Was it an experience you had, a story you heard, something someone shared, an experience with a service coordinator, what would you say if you had to pick one thing that truly inspired you?
There was, I think that's a great question, because I know the moment that changed my trajectory from, working as a teacher in that type of classroom, which I loved, I think I realized that if I worked in a different role, I could help more people, right? But I was also inspired by some of the administrators that came through at the time. The way that they talked about our ability to make change, right, really inspired me. So I felt inspired. And I think, I still believe that I can shape other professionals around me to do practices that have shown to really help other people.
Yeah.
And I have a greater reach then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's twofold. I think I definitely was inspired, specifically when we talk about positive behavior supports, and the approach in that way.
Wonderful, wonderful. How do you believe, Kathy, your early intervention teaching background then shaped your approach, right, to leadership and then coaching adults? So you're instructing students, right? We think of pedagogy, but when we think of adults, we think of andragogy, right? So how do you think your early background, your early experiences with the students, with families, with providers, with colleagues, with, just in your setting, with directors, with administrators, how do you think that shaped your approach today to how you lead as a service coordinator, and then how you coach and mold the adults that you work with?
I think that the basic principle of really listening and observing and then taking what you understand in those moments about the true need and what people want out of, your interaction, and also what the system is looking to support. So an example of this would be when you teach children, you kind of observe and interact in a playful, delightful way, and you build relationship with them. And then from that foundation, you can show them something new that they could learn, right? And with an adult, your intention and your care and your genuine, authentic, like, availability to them, I think roots the start, right? The start of a growing relationship where you can then understand your ability to impact what they want to grow in themselves, and also then what you can offer that they didn't even know of yet,
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So what you can offer that they didn't know of yet. So am I hearing you say you're recognizing something in them that they can offer, recognizing a skill that they have that they don't even see yet, and you're helping them see that and then supporting them to be able to strengthen that skill and then be confident in engaging in it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. I love that, Kathy. So in terms of, let's stick a little bit with coaching and supporting families and staff. How do you apply core behavioral principles, right? When you, in your current role, things like reinforcement, but things like we talk about just kind of extending it from a behavioral principle, because data collection, for example, and data informed decision making is not necessarily a behavior principle, but it's something that goes along with the whole concept of, a behaviorally informed approach. And I heard you in speaking already mention shaping, right? One of those strategies we use when we talk about behavior. But how do you apply things like reinforcement so that the behaviors you want to see in families, in students, in staff continue? When you, in your interactions with families and staff, how do you apply those?
When it comes to my position and my support of others in my role, I really think when you understand something that's going well and reframing it for them and making sure they see what's going well, right? It kind of establishes, okay, I can do this, right? And then moving forward, if there's something you still want to see improve for them, for the value of the student, for the value of the family, offering that next level of support, but in a way that's digestible, in a way that's can be received, I think is crucial. So if you look at it as a behavior principle, some people, have lots of different ways of saying it, but you realize you start to sandwich, surround them with what's going well. So something, in the beginning, you're really you're highlighting the strengths. I like to reframe when I hear somebody talk about something, and then making sure to really enforce what's going well. So a practice that I've done repeatedly is, when I see something really work out well in a meeting, in a situation with a team member, if I saw them put in that extra effort, just acknowledging it, sending an email, commenting on it. So that's one idea in relationship to applying, basic core behavior principles.
Yeah. I'm a testament to that. I can definitely confirm. I mean, that definitely is a strength of yours, is recognizing, the strengths of others when they engage in the behaviors we want to see, and reinforcing them, publicly, right? So you might have a personal conversation with them, but reinforcing them publicly and then bringing it to the attention of their supervisor, for example, so that that person is also aware. I guess my question then is, how have you seen that benefit staff in terms of their acceptance of it, and then that it actually contributes to them continuing to engage in those behaviors and seek out to even engage in more advanced behaviors based on that feedback or reinforcement that you gave?
I think that something that we value in work together as adults is somebody who seems authentically interested in our development and appreciates what we're already bringing to the table. And so when you are met with the opposite of that, simply stated, I think you start to pull back, right? You start to close off. And so my hope would be in using some of this inadvertently, almost like just realizing this is just part of who I am. But in using this strategy, it's allowed me to learn from other people, because they also are willing to come to me and say, I have this question, or I'm feeling this way about this situation. What do you think? It opens the door to conversation that can help aid in developing better processes, right? So if you don't have that open door, or that ability to know this person understands the effort I put in, then you're not going to get those extra moments where you can really build and grow together. So I think what I'm trying to say is this is just like the start, right? And being consistent with that, instead of just constantly sharing what needs to be fixed, what needs to be worked on, especially with people that are coming in with newer skill sets, or this isn't like yet mastery level skill sets, or it's a new environment and they need to integrate what they know somewhere else. So I think just the core behavior principles really do help us in this field, because it helps us make choices with each other that are rooted in something you can lean on a little bit more. It's a little sturdy in a world that's very, very shaky. So that's a good feeling. It's something you can go back to. So say you're faltering, you can go back to it and say, okay, wait, let's regroup. Let's remember what's going well, right? And what do we want to get stable?
I love that, Kathy. And then you use the word choices, and it's something we promote a lot, right? When we talk about changing behavior, like giving someone the choice of how they engage or how they come to the end result, right? You might walk 1 mile, I might run 1 mile, but at the end of the day, we both went from point A to point B. So I think that that's a very valuable point that you just made. And in our work, Kathy, we deal a lot with behavior challenges, right? So we have behavior challenges with the students, but we're also human. I also, you know me, Kathy, so I'm always very big on a humanistic approach, right? We're all human. So we might engage in behaviors too that sometimes may not be the behavior you expect, but at the same time, I'm very big on, you know this, Kathy, compassion. I'm very big on dignity. I'm very big on recognizing every single individual as a person, you know, whatever it is they're going through. So my question for you, Kathy, is how do you balance, right, managing challenging behavior, supporting staff who may not necessarily be following through, who may not be meeting deadlines, thinking of compliance, things like that, but still at the same time respecting their dignity, still at the same time talking to them as a person, still at the same time, you mentioned this earlier, being compassionate, still at the same time listening, as you said, right? How do you balance that, Kathy? Because it could be hard. It could be hard. Like, I need this report to go out. I need this document to go out. It could be hard. How do you balance that? Like, you know, compassionately and, you know, just still with care, but still delivering the message.
Right. I don't know. I think part of it has to do with life experience. I think when I was younger, it was easy to slip into judgment even though I was so young and inexperienced,
Yeah.
you start to get a good handle of what makes sense, or
Mm-hmm.
you're in that world of knowledge and you're learning, right? And then you come through it, you make some mistakes and you realize that A, the world doesn't end when you make mistakes, and B, yeah, sure, people
Yeah.
felt a certain way about it, right?
Yeah.
But in the end, where was your integrity? Where
Right.
did you stand? And did you own what happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's self, right? That's how it happened with me. And then watching other people experience suffering after making a mistake outwardly,
Yeah.
you see the feelings of shame and the feelings of deep sadness and disconnect. And you saw what happened when they felt isolation, right? And so being able to kind of wrap all of that up
Yeah.
into a feeling like that I genuinely have, I can sit in both seats. I can sit in the seat that has a little sense of obligation and justice to the job, and it needs
Yeah.
to be done, right?
Yeah.
Then I can understand how it feels to fail at it and need somebody to help pick you back up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So because I can sit in both seats, I think that gives me a different perspective, right? And then the second piece would be, I personally know from experience and through different literature I've read, different studies I've been a part of, whether it be from an educational perspective, that when you continue to support somebody for the little step they could make in a moment that is most challenging, you are going to support somebody no matter what, and feeling like they are valuable, they
Yeah.
are respected,
Yeah.
and that's just period. Those are the two things. And so when you can support them through that by being kind and offering support, and then, coming back to them with just what the expectation is and being generous, I think it makes all the difference. I really do.
Yeah.
I just stand behind that.
Yeah. I love that, Kathy. You mentioned supporting someone in the smallest way in a moment that is perhaps the most challenging, right? And sometimes it's just the smallest thing, the smallest little word, the kindest gesture, that makes a difference. And so I totally agree with that. And it kind of makes me think of, you're a safety trainer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we talk about safety for a number of reasons: safety in keeping students safe, safety in keeping staff safe, safety in keeping ourselves safe, in family safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you then integrate this idea of being safe and promoting
Mm-hmm.
safety with behavioral regulation, with emotional regulation, right? Because we know that it's so intertwined, right? It's so intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
How do you integrate that at the same time while respecting the child's autonomy?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do you balance that?
I mean, so when you think about the components of safety training that I have implemented, they always start off, again, rooted in dignity and respect, right?
Yeah.
That's like one of the first things you're taught. And then the other thing you're taught is, what is the least intrusive way we can support and include the concepts of human social emotional development, right?
Yeah.
So I think really knowing as an
Yeah.
adult, if I'm not regulated and if I'm not ready, then I can't support the person that needs it the most, right? So I
Yeah.
think that's key. I think we've learned through lots of different ways that children build self-regulation when it's modeled for them, when they're given choices, and when they can feel that they're secure in that environment that they're in. So
Yeah.
I think if we can just support the adults in our lives to prioritize themselves to ensure that they're safe and healthy first.
Yeah.
We know lots of ways. I'm not going to lecture on them right now. But I think then we can then implement really good practices that will help get an environment where children can be regulated, setting up the physical environment in a way that it feels safe and dependable, like routines.
Yeah.
And then especially for our children that have significant delays, how do we establish communication and visuals that really enforce these very basic strategies, right?
Yeah.
That will then allow them to start building autonomy, even with that strong need that they might have, right?
Yeah.
So I do think it's very possible. I definitely think safety training is integral to, I think, early childhood right now.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful that it can kind of expand in its own way for parents so that they feel a little bit more control without actually having the formal meaning of control, meaning they have more understanding of the little ways they can make a difference.
Yeah. Wonderful. So in a recent episode, it just, whatever you just said reminded me of this. I feel like I could sum up what you said with Maslow before Bloom.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or one that's coming to mind is regulation, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Regulation before reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's everything you just said. Like that is so important because if the basic needs are not met, right? And those kinds of things, how do we expect and Bloom in terms of, Bloom's taxonomy, in terms of the child learning and making progress. But then also if we're not regulated, the families are not regulated, the staff are not regulated, children are not regulated, how do we expect them to reason? And I think that then takes us back, Kathy, to, you started off with compassion. Those, if we have the understanding of those ideas, it just forces us, right, air quotes, to be compassionate, right, because we understand that. And that's kind of what I hope, as people listen to these conversations, it makes them think, things to take away and walk away from these conversations with. Those things are so important. Speaking of that, Kathy, so we talked earlier about you transitioning from, classroom teacher, autistic support teacher to service coordination, which requires, systems level leadership, right?
Yeah.
And then service coordination requires working across agencies. And we know what that means, right? So it's, the agency you work with as the local education agency. Then there might be the agency that employs a personal care assistant. Then there might be the agency that owns the preschool, right? And it's a lot to navigate. So then we talk about, so let's just give an example and then I'll ask your thoughts. But if you think of like a personal care assistant, right? So for listeners, that's just someone who is assigned to support a student one-to-one. So they're getting direction from us. Then there's direction from the agency. Then there's direction from the preschool. A big one is the expectation that a personal care assistant should not be alone with a child, right? So how do you, Kathy, what leadership behaviors do you lean on to help bridge communication, to help bridge expectations when you have so many different expectations across so many different agencies and providers, but still being supportive of the people, right, on your team, and still leading with dignity, compassion, respect, those kinds of things. What do you lead on as a leader?
I mean, I feel a bit redundant, only because when you have so many agencies that support one little beautiful child, if they are not on the same page, it almost feels like, I'm sure, exasperating to the many adults that are supporting from parent to teacher to special education program provider, it can be frustrating. So I really do think clear expectations is key, and being able to coordinate. I'm sure supervisors have a difficult job of vetting agencies to come on board because there's such a need, right? And so as a coordinator, I'm not involved in that part, but then to know the things that have been successful in coordination with the support of my supervisors, within the support of the teachers that are underneath. So the biggest thing is consistent communication with access to resources that then can be leaned on without a lag, right? So I would say clear expectations with consistent communication is key. And then I think the next thing is that commonality in language that's used across all people, commonality in practice that's used across all people, and then reflection of that over time to build a pattern of success for the child is the biggest key. And support in the expectation, especially when you're dealing with supporting a one-to-one to be with a child, supporting that individual to understanding their capacity and their role. And I think our primary focus has always been, we want to work ourselves out of a job. That's our hope all the time. And so knowing when you know your job, you can go in without ego almost to work for that child, right? So when I look at all of that is required in working with many people and individuals and agencies, I think, again, clear expectations, consistency in the message is going to be the base. And then really looking at communication with review to support changes to work yourself out of the child's life so they can be more independent.
Yeah, wonderful. That I love all of that. You said commonality and expectations, and I think setting the stage for those values from the beginning is very critical, right? Because you're starting off like that and building your relationship. So you've done all of that. And I've seen missteps, you've seen missteps, I've made missteps, right? You talked earlier about making mistakes, but, being able to learn from them. What are some missteps you've seen in interagency collaboration? So I'm talking about this and I'm asking you about this, but I'm thinking of sometimes when we think of the IEP team, right? Sometimes one of the missteps I see is team members having IEP conversations outside of the context, right, of an IEP meeting, right? What are some common missteps you've seen in your experience when you have to do, interdisciplinary collaboration, and what are some suggestions you have for leaders or those that you work with or those that you guide and lead and support to shift those dynamics where we're seeing fewer missteps and more of what you just mentioned, things like, the collaboration, the expectations, the commonality, the communication, things like that?
I mean, I think the biggest misstep that I've seen in any role and the kind of the downfall of a role, it would be the isolation factor. So somebody's feeling disconnected or isolated from their purpose, whether it be teacher to one-to-one to, an assistant who can help, right? And so if you're going to see that, I think that leaders can shift by encouraging dependable strategies for how to connect with somebody who can answer the question or what resources they can lean on to get the answer. And I think some of this starts with the feeling of scarcity of time, of resources. I think some of this comes from a lack of community at times because of the dynamics in education right now. And so I think if leaders can find a way to cultivate community in supports,
Yeah.
and then a consistent space to get resources that make it easy, is a resource necessarily something to read that's many pages long? No.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a contact, a check-in, something like that. And I also think having access to people with the answers, like an open door policy where there's set times to really connect about anything really,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
going to improve and shift us away from the lack of progress in those areas of
Yeah.
retaining, good people, or really making the changes that we need to make educationally.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It makes me think about, Kathy, in our field, the word compliance, right? We perhaps go to sleep and we wake up and we dream about the word compliance. But how do you support teams with maintaining compliance, right? While remaining focused on child-centered outcomes. So here is an example for you, but also for listeners. So, for example, the difference between recommending, right, do a functional behavior assessment. We need to remain compliant if the child is engaging in challenging behavior and, it's impeding learning, things like that. So making a recommendation for personal care assistant based on the need of the child, and not based on, well, this school only has one teacher in the classroom, because it's not focused on the child. Or making that recommendation, again, based on the needs of the child, so staying focused on the child. And, oh, well, I think this one school suspended this child or expelled this child, so I'm afraid that this next school is going to do the same thing. But at the same time, do we recommend a more restrictive environment, just to say, we want to make sure we're being compliant and continuing to offer some setting, right, for the child to receive services, but we still need to stay focused on the child. So how do you support teams with balancing that? Because, or even like compliance, rushing through things, you just talked about time to get it done, but losing sight of the child, where the child's at, what are the child's needs, and ensuring we're addressing those things. So how do you help teams balance the both?
It's definitely not a perfect process. I would say, it's so interesting. Sometimes just slowing down, right?
Yeah.
So like, even when you don't really have time, you could be in a position where you really feel like the clock is ticking. We must get this done. You realize there's a new awareness that there's a problem, and maybe you're on your 30th day of a timeline, and stopping and having a thoughtful discussion with curiosity is often what gets us to the point, right? That we realize, oh, wait, stop, and that's more about a case where you're realizing there's more here than meets the eye, right? But then there's some cases, like you said, where you're getting pressure, right? You're getting pressure because you think the pressure is for whatever reason. Maybe it's from a program that really emphasizes certain things trigger the need for extra staff, or certain things trigger, one behavior might trigger in a teacher's mind a more restrictive setting, right? And then you slow down and you ask good questions about what do they see in this area and that area and that area, and you compile it. So it's not just about that one behavior that they think immediately directs them to a certain service or support, right? Because we can get stuck a little bit, get in our patterns. It's almost like flexing a muscle, like it's good to have a skill, and it's good to have history kind of guide you. Oh, last time I did this because of that situation. but there's still more layers. And I think
Yeah.
if we can have discussions,
Yeah.
with good questions, I think you get that back. You get that individualized education program really back.
Yeah.
So I think slowing down is the biggest thing that comes to mind for me.
I love that. It makes me think, Kathy, of two things. One here and one back home in Grenada. So TED Talks usually talk a lot. They use this phrase, I'll make sure I'm saying it correct. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. Meaning exactly what you said. The more you just pause and you take your time, then you spend less time correcting mistakes. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. In Grenada, we say more haste, less speed, right? The more the more you rush through the thing, you make mistakes, you make errors, you miss steps, you still have to slow down anyway, right? So
Right.
I think your point of just slowing down, pausing, thinking it through, processing, reflecting, having conversations. Sometimes, Kathy, and I believe the same may have happened to you. Sometimes we've been in IEP meetings where we have to say, let's pause. Let's reconvene. It has happened. Instead of just rushing to end the meeting right here and there, that has happened. So I really like that point. And it leads me, Kathy, to think of in our roles as educators, as special educators, in your role as a service coordinator, we come across complex challenges, right? We have challenges every single day, but some are just so complex for a number of reasons. Perhaps the severity, perhaps just the number of people involved, whatever that situation is. Can you share an example of how you were able to handle a complex challenge in your role, whether it's your recent role or past role, it doesn't really matter. But at the same time, remain grounded because of the behavioral principles, because of the behavioral principles you've implemented. But I think also, Kathy, of your experience, right? Because you mentioned that earlier, like your experiences allow you to be able to relate with people in a way that's different than if you didn't have those experiences. So can you share an example of, how your understanding of behavior helped you to really resolve a complex service coordination challenge or professional challenge? Anything of that nature?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm trying to find a way to say this. So I think this is common right now, so I think it's relatable.
Okay.
We're having experiencing the largest, I think, turnover rate for our program in the education field.
Yeah.
That I've experienced in my career. So I've been doing this over 20 years, and I think when you watch people come and go and you place energy into supporting a system like this, you can kind of see the cracks. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so I've realized if I continue to support in a steady way with communication, with clear, supports, I think the biggest takeaway is those people that you've touched are able to either use what you've given them and sustain and engage in a way that is meaningful to the time that you're there. And you've been true to yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I say this because it's kind of discouraging. And if you focus on that component of it, it gets to be difficult
Yeah.
to be your authentic self with everybody.
Yeah.
And so I think the most real example for me right now is you have to be out there in the world of parents and children who want that support, and that support to them means so much. And if you're only focused on, here I am meeting with you again, and here's your third or fourth new staff member that I am bringing to you. If you focus on that, you kind of can't actually focus on the help, the solution, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if that answered the question, but that's what comes to mind. Because it's so current for me. It's such a present issue. So
no, it is a complex challenge. It's across the field, as you said. It has started really rising since COVID, Kathy, and it really hasn't slowed down. So it is a complex challenge. And to your point, it's how you present the message. But then before even the presentation of the message, Kathy, is how you think of the delivery of the message and how you think of the situation. And that you used the word reframing earlier. So if we reframe our thoughts and how we think of the situation, how we see the situation, what we say, what comes out of our mouth is going to align with how we see it and how we think of it. So I think absolutely that was a great response, because it is a challenge that affects not just me, not just you, but everyone in our field. And how do we handle it? And how do we say to a family, okay, here's this new person, but it's sort of like, well, it's someone new experiences for the child, right? Because, we work in early intervention, early childhood education. And at some point, the child is going to transition to school age learning. And if we think of it that way, at that point, they're going to be exposed to more people, right? So it's how can we shape the message? How can we present the message? Okay, great. I understand, might not be your preference, but at least it gives the child other experiences and helps mold and shape the child, for what the child will be experiencing in the future. So no, I think that was absolutely a great response. It is a complex challenge. So thank you for sharing that. So thinking of that, Kathy, and staying on the topic of families, right? It's always a hot topic in education and special education as well. But how do you help families? And me, so I'm big on this, like really helping them feel like they are part of the team. They are a member. They are a respected member. They are a valued member. They have a voice. Help them feel empowered. Help them feel confident. Help them feel seen. Help them feel heard. And I know that's something that's meaningful to you as well, Kathy. So what are strategies you've used that have really helped you build those sorts of relationship with the families, but not only with them, Kathy, but like help your team members, begin to adopt the same approach?
So some strategies I've used is knowing from my own perspective that I believe in that. So that's the first thing. I think it's integral to programming for children this age. Often what I have to share with families is we are moving away from home base, right? That's the home based perspective, into an education base, which feels wild for families to think of their 3-year-old in education, right? But that is important, I think, believing in that, really believing that they are the experts for their child, and believing that they should trust their instincts and that we want to hear all about it, right?
Yeah.
Offering them that time to share it. So every time I contact families, how's it going? Just give me what's going well, a glow, tell me what you want to see happening next, that's important. Often when they speak, I think if you are really listening, you reframe, restate, because that validates for them. You're not just checking off a box. It means something. It also helps all my counterparts that work directly with their child hear it, right?
Yeah.
And then making sure that perspective is then embedded in the program for the child, right? So an example for a preschooler or a young child learning would be, a parent's desire to hear them say their name, or, mom, or check off that milestone of being able to stay in a play space with their cousin while they're at a party, like those are huge for them, because the impact it has down the line is something I've heard from families whose children are now in their 20s, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think that's really big. And then I think the last thing is validating them in what their concerns are. So we may not be on the same page all the time with strengths and needs focus, for goals, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes families come to the table with a difference of what their target is, because we're looking at a 25% or greater delay, right? Or we're looking at different criteria because we're an educational entity. But that doesn't mean we don't validate that concern was still there, and we don't offer resources. And we also share our knowledge a little bit. So, my goodness, I hear that that's a concern for you, but maybe this is a different perspective, right?
Yeah.
So I think all of that then gives them the understanding that they are the leaders in their child's program.
Yeah.
And then the empowerment part, I think, comes from, not only saying yes, not only I hear you, but also, hey, you are a huge part of this. We want to make sure you have the resources to say they're learning with their teacher. We want you to learn to do it too. So how do we provide them with supports to then not just be the person getting the progress note? They're the person enforcing the progress as well.
Yeah. I love that. You mentioned validating, right? And it makes me think of, how do we support staff to validate or navigate when they're in emotionally charged situation? So that could be, say, for example, you're working with the child threw a block, hit you in the face, right? And so there's that. Or a staff may then, on the other end of that, Kathy, the staff may then start to become upset, or it might just be the child has been running across the classroom all day. So they're at that point, they're at the breaking point. Or it might be a parent who's upset about something that occurred. And so you have this confrontation between parent and staff, for example. How do you help staff navigate, those kinds of moments?
For sure. I think the first thing is listening, just hearing them out, letting it be out there, right? Remembering that when somebody is feeling a heightened emotion and they're expressing something, restating what you heard to try to make sure that they felt that what they said was captured well, right? Like, do I understand where you're really coming from with it? Helps. And then making time again to talk about it when they're calm and they can digest something, I think helps. The other thing is reminding, especially families, about child development, right? So children of a certain age are going to have behaviors, and their awareness or their ability to restrain themselves to not do those behaviors is different than somebody who is much older. And so I think a balance of listening, understanding, openness to be able to hear it helps diffuse it, right? So the goal would be to diffuse it. And then at that point, you can really come to the table again, even minutes later, to digest and get some solutions out there, right? Or some ideas.
Yeah, I love that. So let's flip the script, Kathy. Let's talk about your own emotional intelligence, your ability to self-regulate, your ability to be aware of your own emotion, your own regulation before responding to others, your own ability to self-manage. How does your emotional intelligence show up for you even, or for others when you lead and you coach, right? You might say, all right, Kathy, to yourself, just take a pause, take a break, things like that. How does that show up for you?
I think the ability to take perspectives.
Okay.
And to check in with my own system, my own body, and then trying to adjust my responses based upon, checking in with people. Do you just need me to hear you right now? Are you venting? Trying not to make it a greater, when I use my ability to understand and relate, I also try and make sure that I don't add fuel, I think sometimes somebody needs you to just say, yeah, this isn't okay right now. How can I be here for you? And stepping back and not like just jumping to offer advice, right? Some people just need to let it out. Yeah. I think it's so interesting. Emotional intelligence is being thrown around, and I think it's definitely something that is important to me in general, that the world could use a great dose of just understanding of how your emotions work and how you use them to get your needs met. But leaders and coaches who can't harness it, right? I think are putting us at a disadvantage. So if I can just say, if you can harness the ability to understand how another person might be feeling, so that you can make an effective decision or support, or maybe just pull back a bit, is going to be huge, I think. And I'm hopeful that it can be something that is taught differently over the next decades, because I think it's really going to change our world if we can put it in programming as early as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking of the other, right? And you mentioned the word coach, you mentioned the word leader. It makes me think of, Kathy, the difference between influence or impact and control, right? A true leader is all about influence and impact, and less about controlling others. So what is a leadership moment in your experience, Kathy? So it could be something you did, something you observed, whether it's from a child, a colleague, a team member, or even a supervisor, that taught you something about influence and impact as more important to leadership than control. So something I think of is, when I think of influence and impact versus control, is that this is just generic examples. Let's say, for example, in my relationship with you as supervisor, that I was able to get you to a point where you on your own, internally motivated to complete this task or do this thing or achieve this goal, right? As opposed to, well, I'm just going to do this because this is what I was told I need to do. So now I was able to have that impact on you where you're just invested in doing it for the greater good, or for the child, or for yourself, most importantly, or impact as, just as you said in the beginning, Kathy, as helping people recognize skills in them. So that's something I'm really big on. And people moving from, because there are several people I've supervised who are able to move from one position to another, not because they just pursued it, but because I was able to see something in them and recognize it. Same with me. I always say the only reason I'm in this field now, Kathy, as much as I am, is because I was working as a therapeutic staff support with a kiddo who lived in a group home for boys. He had bipolar disorder. But one of my colleagues, not even my supervisor, just kind of recognized how I was, working with him and supporting him. And he was the person that said to me, and I'll give him credit as long as I live, have you ever heard of ABA, applied behavior? I'd never heard of it. He was like, I think that's the thing for you. I think you should look into it. He was like, I know St. Joe's has a program. Go check them out. That, Kathy, is impact, right? Because he was able to see. And then I was able, the way that he gave the feedback, the way that, you know, he was like, did you hear about it? And gave me the resources and things like that. Then I sought it out. And then it became, all right, this is something I want to do, right? But that's how he was able to have influence. And that's why I always go back to the point, Kathy, of leadership is not based on title or position. He wasn't my supervisor, but he saw, right? And stepped up. He literally stepped up, you know, as a leader in like helping me recognize that. And that's where the only reason, Kathy, I am, because I never heard of it. And I don't know, I would never be able to say at this point, you know, whether I would have been in this field or not. But that to me was a clear example of influence, a positive, you know, impact, as opposed to my supervisor said to do it this way, so I have to do it that way, right? Kind of deal.
Absolutely.
You know, those are some of the things that come to mind, where it's to motivate people so they just want to do it, or they want to do it the right way, as opposed to just doing it just to check the boxes, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's definitely, for me, I would say, when I think about moving from one role to another, the influence of leaders that were around me at the time, in the reflection of, you know, how you communicate across, you know, your job as a teacher, but the way you communicate across all the people you work with, coordinating with them, getting them on track to make this plan for this child, then incorporating it into the family's life, and then coordinating with the agencies that they worked with. You know, they inspired me to think that I could make more of a difference than just in a child's life, right? So when we think about moments, you know, those little moments where somebody reminds you that this isn't just an isolated incident, or how it actually can be mirrored in another role, right? Like the safety training, you know, becoming a safety trainer, the importance for me in doing that was again a discussion I had with a leader who said, you know, this is something that you do well in. When you're in this program, you understand it really well, and I think you could teach it. You know, because you've experienced it firsthand so many years. So anyway, for sure. I definitely think, and that probably helps, you know, me do it for others, because it's happened for me, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And that, Kathy, right there is a great example, right? How someone was able to inspire you, so that influence or impact, to the point where now your ability to inspire and lead others has expanded to so many others, and then you can do the same for them. So I love that. What would you say, Kathy, to someone who is just entering early intervention or special education today, in today's world? Into today's environment, in these fields.
I think the first thing I would say is make sure your cup is still full. You cannot pour into somebody else's cup without yours being full. The children that we love and teach are learning from us, whether we're teaching a lesson on, you know, big and little, or whether we're talking to our colleague and we're coming in the door, greeting them, you know, warmly. We are the models for them. They are always looking, and they are always learning. And then I would say the root of early childhood education is play, and connection. And that's with adults and with children. And so if you can base your foundation on that, you can do pretty much
Yeah.
any of the
Yeah.
other parts.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. And I love your point about filling your cup, right? We always have to take care of the
Mm-hmm.
self. But I'll give you another spin on that Kathy, that I
Mm-hmm.
shared recently, was being able to face challenges, face obstacles. So you're
Mm-hmm.
doing it yourself. So you're pouring into yourself because you now have that experience, right? And you're
Mm-hmm.
reinforcing yourself, as opposed to if you always go to the service coordinator, or you always go to the supervisor to solve the problem for you, you're pouring into them and, they're already
Mm-hmm.
filled. So really embracing opportunities to face challenges, to learn new things, to take on new challenges, new adventures, so that in addition to making sure our cup is filled and overflowing in terms of self-care, but like giving ourselves, being brave enough to
Mm-hmm.
try the challenge, take it on, try something new, so that, we continue to fill our cup with new diverse experiences. So from your perspective, Kathy, what would you say are some of the biggest opportunities for leadership growth in early childhood services?
Hmm. I think for system changes,
Yeah,
I think the biggest opportunity would be for our leaders to first open up their awareness of how early childhood childcare programs, daycares are running and what they're leaning on as far as curriculum or strategies that they're using in their programs, and then supporting the integration of some sort of regular ed, special ed dynamics.
yeah,
Because I think what we're seeing is there's a nice balance in lots of programs, um, whether they're intentional or not, right?
yeah,
So I think the biggest opportunity for leadership growth is to have someone supporting the best practices for early childhood education so that we can ensure all children are able to learn together,
yeah,
and that adults are given the readiness and the awareness of child development, right? So that they
yeah,
really understand what and how to teach at this
yeah,
age.
yeah, yeah. And then, as we start to wind our conversation down, Kathy, what would you say are some daily behaviors that leaders can adopt to shift cultures and outcomes? One I heard you say a lot tonight is listening.
Mm-hmm.
I also
Mm-hmm.
heard you say, without phrasing it that way, listening to hear as opposed to listening to respond, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so that theme just resonated for me throughout this conversation, because it all comes back to listening, whether it's, listening by observing or listening by hearing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say some just daily behaviors we should adopt as leaders?
Greeting warmly. I know
Yeah,
that sounds
yeah,
maybe silly, but be present, you know, open door policy, open door schedule of some sort,
yeah,
um, clear plans, clarity in your vision. Even if it changes, that's okay. Like change is going to happen, but, so every day, there's benefit in routine. So being able to establish a routine for your people that are leaning on you for support, they know what to expect,
yeah.
be consistent with your message, right?
Mm,
And that message, that energy you give out, right, daily is still a small step. I think those are just the basics,
yeah, yeah.
personally.
Yeah, I love that. And if you had, Kathy, to define leadership as a behavior in one sentence, what would you say? What would you say it means to you?
I would just say leadership is listening with curiosity. That would be what I would think of.
I love that. Um, I think of it, I love that, listening with curiosity. And I think of, for me, I always go to the concept of leadership for me is the ability to be, as you said, consistent so that people are able to flourish and leave
Mm-hmm.
better than they were, when I met them.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I
Mm-hmm.
like that. I love that word curiosity. Thank you. And
Mm-hmm.
then to close us off, Kathy, what would be three leadership takeaways that you would want educators, special educators, early childhood educators, or anyone listening actually to walk away with from this conversation?
Hmm. This is really a interesting season that
Yeah.
we're living through.
Yeah.
So um, I'm gonna kind of say um, we teachers, parents, and children are scared, and I think they want to grow and learn in safety.
Yeah.
And so our leaders need to be prepared, I think, to model safe, secure practices. And we need to make sure we're checking in on each other personally. I think that's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
I think we need to ensure that there is a system to support children and families to know about their programming, whether it be just a child care program or a special education program. As a leader in any of it, I think we need to have transparency.
Yeah.
And then I think the last thing would be that, I just think we're tired. I think we're all
Yeah.
just very tired.
Yeah.
And so leading with grace and with
Yeah.
kindness is huge.
Yeah.
So those are the things I've been
Yeah.
thinking about a lot
Yeah.
lately.
Yeah. I love that. So I heard safety, like sort of safety
Mm-hmm.
and dignity, transparency, so that
Mm-hmm.
people have that level of awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and just leading with grace, compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, Kathy. Very, very meaningful for the current, what we're all experiencing currently. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Kathy,
Yeah, thank you.
it was a pleasure. I enjoyed having this conversation. I took a lot away from everything you said, and I'm sure our listeners would too. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for inviting me. It was nice to catch up and speak with you about this topic. It's important to me.
Wonderful.
Thank you for listening to Behaviorally Speaking, Leadership for Changemakers. And Kathy, thank you for sharing your experiences, your stories, and your wisdom with such honesty and heart. Throughout this conversation, Kathy reminded us that leadership is built in the smallest moments, the quiet reframing that helps a colleague see their own strength, the choice to slow down when systems feel rushed, the courage to lead with compassion even when we're tired. We heard how safety is not just a protocol, but a posture, how emotional regulation becomes an act of dignity, and how the most transformative leaders are those who listen with curiosity. You can access the summary of today's episode on our Behaviorally Speaking Insights for Changemakers companion blog at esthercbubadaservices.com/blog. If you have a story about leadership and behavior, share your story with us. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone. For training, coaching, and behavior-based leadership support, visit esthercbubadaservices.com. Until next time, lead with humanity and purpose, practice with compassion and intention, and create meaningful, lasting change. This is Dr. Bubb. Stay inspired.